Hello! Welcome back to Quora Quest, where we discover the worst things that people have gone through or have done. Today, we're going to talk about church experiences. We're moving into bad church experiences, which, let's get this out of the way, might be risky. So I might preview some of these, but I'm hoping some of them are like good. Um, I hope none of them are bad, you know. Okay, let's jump right into it. After a sip of coffee. Ah, all right. This may not sound like much, but I have remembered it for decades and still feel protective of my mother. At Christmas time one year, when I was in college, my mother asked me if I would like to go to the Christmas Eve service at Plymouth do we need to say the name of the church? Okay. At the church with her. The church she had attended as a child and she and Daddy had been married in. It's a little weird that you just say she and Daddy. You could say my dad. It's not my daddy. I don't have a daddy. I've never called my dad daddy. And I understand people calling their dad daddy, but only if you're talking to Daddy. You can't say she and Daddy had been married in. You can't just call him Daddy to the internet. Anyway, that's a little point, but it's an important point that it's pretty weird that you said and she and Daddy had been married in. It's she and my dad or my daddy. Like you can say my daddy if you want to say daddy. But even like she and dad would be weird because it's not my dad. My my dad is in Florida. I don't know you. We had actually been active in the church until I was 9, but had not been active since then. I said, "Sure." Okay. So, it's about 12 years since you were last at church. You're going to church. It's the church for your mom and daddy. Um Great, but you're a little out of practice. Sounds like. Which I get. I mean, yeah, I took a lot of years off. The church was nicely decorated for the holidays, and as we took our seats in a pew midway down the left side, important, midway left, we listened to the organist beautifully playing Christmas carols. Delightful. What more could you ask for? It's Christmas Eve. We were both enjoying the service and the atmosphere until it became clear that communion was being offered. We looked at each other in shock. Communion? In this church? That was very unexpected to us, since it certainly had not been a thing when we used to attend. What? And according to my mother, it had not previously been a part of the church's practice during her active years either. Is there a church that doesn't do communion? I I thought. Well, I mean, I grew up Catholic, but I thought that was like a thing for every Christian denomination um was eating a little bit of the body and blood of Christ. Like transubstantiation is a pretty big deal, and I think that just throws me for a little bit of a loop. Um, that maybe they couldn't afford the bread in the past, and now they got those nice little wafers, little Necco wafers without the sugar. Okay. Never having taken communion and not wanting to start, we chose to just calmly step aside and wait in the aisle while others walked up front to participate, then returned to their seats. Okay, done. Sure, if it's not a practice that you're used to, why would you do it? I'm with you on all this. Weird, a little weird, but I'm with you. It's only weird because of my own experience. When we exited the sanctuary at the end of the service, the minister. Why do we need to put names? was outside in the foyer doing his own meet and greet. It's actually kind of fun, the meet and greets with the priests afterwards. Little handshake, little like, hey, how's it going? I used to like it. I don't want to tell about my church. There was a Monsignor at the church where I grew up. That he was awesome, and then he died, and then the new head priest was not great. He was all about like, if you don't bring your children to penance, the parents should have a millstone hung about their neck and they should be thrown into the river. So pretty intense compared to like peace and love stuff that the old Monsignor was throwing at us. Like there was a time I was an altar boy, and there was a time that I fell asleep during the Christmas mass. It was Christmas Day, not Christmas Eve. But I could not sleep that night because Santa was coming. You know, oh Santa, and um and I had to I was falling asleep during the actual mass because I stayed up all night. And so when at one point I got close to the priest during the service, I was like, I'm so sorry. I stayed up all night waiting for Santa. I'm just so sleepy now. And I was like 10, 12, you know. And what this Monsignor did is he told the whole audience, but everyone laughed and it was a cool thing, you know? I could not see this happening from the guy that replaced him at all. I would have been a real sinner for falling asleep during the Christ Mass. Anyway, okay, so they don't get any communion, and now they're going up to the Reverend and saying, "Hey, how's it going, Reverend? That was a great service. Really, really spiritually fulfilling." He was the senior minister and had a deep voice and an imposing presence. Very helpful for being the head of a downtown church. Oh. My mother was in front of me, so he took her right hand in both of his and asked her how she had liked the ceremony. Being the truthful person she is, she said it was lovely and that she liked parts of it. Sometimes you don't have to be truthful. You can if a priest asks you if you like, well, okay, let's see. It's going to be about the communion for sure, but like, I don't know. Maybe I don't have that full truth thing, but like, if a priest asks you if you like the service, just say yes. It's Christmas Eve Mass, and it seems like you haven't been in a while anyway. So just say yes and move on, and you're not going back to church anytime soon. Why do you have to... Okay, this clearly wasn't what he was expecting her to say, because who's going to criticize a priest for their mass? I mean, even the millstone guy, we wouldn't go up afterwards and be like, hey, that was some real messed up shit you said about how parents should be drowned for not bringing their children to confession. But to just be like, I like parts of it. Okay. This clearly wasn't what he was expecting her to say, and he immediately quizzed her. Well, what part didn't you like? Guy's all about constructive criticism, you know, he can take a note. She quietly and clearly said that she was surprised at there having been communion offered, since that was new to her. Still holding her hand in both of his, he told her she was wrong to feel that way, and proceeded to almost get down for daring to criticize anything regarding the church. To almost get down. And proceeded to almost... Yeah, I do not know what that is supposed to be. But he proceeded to almost get down for daring to criticize anything regarding the church. How it was part of the United Church of Christ, and how they had a responsibility and duty to offer the congregants what they wanted, needed, etc., etc. Okay, so... I get not... Like, the part where you weren't ready for the communion, and you didn't do the communion, and you stayed on the side is fine, You don't have to make that the priest's problem. At that point, my mother quietly interjected that she didn't need communion on Christmas Eve, and his booming deep voice, right, I forgot, part of the United Church of Christ. I need to do the booming deep voice. At that point, my mother quietly interjected that she didn't need communion on Christmas Eve. That's that's like one of the big days, though. Like, you can't. There are things you could argue with a priest. Um, the importance of communion on Christmas Eve. I don't think you can argue with a priest with that. Although I guess, they had a responsibility and duty to offer the congregants what they wanted needed. So if there were some people that were like, "Where's the communion?" a few years back, and they're like, "Well, I guess we're offering communion." That's not a problem for your mom or you. Just don't. At that point, my mother quietly interjected that she didn't need communion on Christmas Eve. In his booming deep voice, he continued to berate her verbally while still holding her hand in both of his, almost a lock. To my mind, he was starting to cause a scene also, holding up the flow of people exiting, and even aware of that, he was not going to let my mother go and actually refused to let go of her hand, even after she specifically asked him to. Okay, this reverend might be a little butthurt about the communion. But it's like, if this isn't what you saw coming, if you didn't see that the priest would then try to tell you why the communion is good, then you shouldn't bring up anything about the communion to the priest. Like, I'm sorry, but this that's like going up to a baker and being like, "Yeah, the cake was a little dry, but whatever." And them being like, "What do you mean it was dry?" And you going, Don't worry about it, don't worry about it." And it's like, of course they're gonna try to talk to you and figure it out, or convince you otherwise. What do you expect? The priest is just like, it's communion. Okay. She was clearly becoming uncomfortable at being the cynosure. That's a new word. Wow, you're really breaking out the. I gotta learn that one. Oh, it's a company. What? Okay. According to Merriam-Webster, uh, the northern constellation Ursa Minor, one that serves to direct or guide, or a center of attraction or attention. All right. Being the center of attraction of multiple eyes. Cynosure. How do you pronounce it? Cynosure? Cynosure. Interesting. I don't like that word. I like a lot of complex words. I don't like that one. Yet, it was as if he almost wanted others to see how right he was, while we just wanted to leave. Again, don't get into an. Don't. Just say it was a lovely service if you don't want the priest to prove how right he is. He's dedicated his life to the church, ideally. Even if it's a corrupt one, it's still like, don't expect the priest to just be like, win some, you lose some, I guess. You didn't have to bring up the communion. This is all your fault. I'm not sympathetic towards this at all. Yeah, you bet you wanted to leave because you were being butthurt about nothing, about other people getting communion. Oh, this isn't my church anymore. Things change. Okay. I felt very frustrated and helpless as I stood beside her, bedside her. Okay. Almost in shock. I was raised to never make a scene in public, and Christmas Eve at the church was about as public as you could get. I wanted to yell at him, "Let go of her hand," but at church, at Christmas, in public, the minister? By then, she was trying to twist her arm to get him to release her fingers, and he tacitly refused as he continued to tell her how wrong she was. It is a little much on the priest's part. But you complained about communion. I'm like, I would love to know the specifics of what he's saying as far as the how wrong she was, you know, because it seems like this is the kind of thing that if you actually listen instead of getting freaked out because he's holding your hand, then there might be some points. Or maybe he was going off and being crazy. But it's just like, without the specific context of what he's saying, then there is not a way for me to determine whether you deserve this treatment or not. Because all I've got from this is, we haven't been to church in a lot of years. They added something to the experience that is optional. We didn't like it, so we complained about it. The priest was like, yeah, but some people like it. And then we kept complaining, so he fought back. And didn't let us go because we just wanted to drop our little, like, communion's weird. We're out. Like, you could have just said you liked the... You could have just said it was a lovely service. It's Christmas Eve. At church, at Christmas, in public, the minister? Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot that he's holding on to her and not letting her go. That's not okay on its own. But what did you expect? And probably not to be held there. So, like, you can't complain and then not receive whatever the the backlash of that complaint is. It does sound a little overblown. I will absolutely give you that. But it also sounds a little overblown in your eyes. Okay. Then someone, a tall lady, came from behind his right shoulder, calling him by name and exclaiming what a lovely service it has been. See, she knows how to do it. She knows how to do it. Having found a more receptive audience, he finally released my mother's hand and we quickly walked away. Escape! It must have been only several minutes, but to us it felt much longer. Several minutes? When we got to the car, she said to me, I feel as if I've been attacked, and was shaking and upset. That's not okay. It's probably too far. The priest went too far. The reverend went too far by holding on and not letting her go. But you know the end of that sentence. It starts with a but. Okay. I concurred and apologizes for not doing anything to get him to let go of her, and she said that was okay. She was very disappointed at his actions, though, and expressed her gladness that we didn't go to church very often. Plus, we agreed we had been out of line and unprofessional. Oh, he had been out of line. I thought maybe they had a thing. Anyway, and we also agreed that we would never go back, and we haven't. Man, I don't know on this one. And I don't think... I think the priest got... I feel like the priest felt like he was attacked. Because he just did his whole service and was told communion's weird. And then he tried to explain. They tried to just run away from an explanation. Because he has such a deep voice and an imposing presence. Totally his fault. And then, it's one of those, like, I get the feeling he was trying to explain. They were very unreceptive. He tried harder. That ended up being too much trying. And that meant that she felt attacked. Which, don't victim blame. If someone feels a way, that's not their fault for being made to feel that way. He could have not done such a, like, you gotta stay here and listen to me. You could have just said there was a tall lady, came from behind his shoulder, called him by name, and exclaimed what a lovely service it had been. That's it. So easy. Although priests do have quite the hand grip when it comes to, like, Ah, my child. How can I create a diversified portfolio that could provide strong returns while minimizing risk? I don't know. All right. We've read another thing from this guy. So let's continue. I'm glad we've got some cohesive themes going on. This man is from last episode. All right. This was the worst experience I've ever had trying to get married. Interesting. Okay, trying to get married. I was raised Catholic, but was not going to church anymore. Hi, nice to meet you. Me too. Although now I go to the Greek Orthodox Church sometimes with my girlfriend because she goes often. I need to get my ass up on Sundays. It's nice. Anyway, but as far as like, it's more about the spirituality than it is about the. Anyway, we don't need to get into me. My cousin was a Catholic priest and was going to do the ceremony as a gift to us. That's great. That's, you know, it's quite a choice. Interesting that both exists within one family. That raised Catholic but not going anymore, but then also a Catholic priest. Those are intense things. And I've seen for his happily married for 50 years and love her more each year. The last one was I was raised Catholic and now I'm reformed non-Catholic or something like that he escaped. So this is very interesting. Interesting family of this man. My cousin had left the Jesuit order and was freelancing while Jesuit. Okay. Wow. That's that's intense. I went to a Jesuit Catholic high school and like if regular Catholic is here, then Jesuit's like way all the way off the screen. Um, just a lot more rules and things. Like in high school, Jesuit Catholic high school, instead of a detention, we would get a jug, and it's the exact same thing. You just hang out after school in a room and get like stared down at by the dean for 30 minutes to an hour. Um, but the big difference is Jug stood for justice under God. So if you were late to class, that's a sin, and you need to get some justice under God. If your phone went off, God's pretty pissed. Do some penance, justice under God. So that's the Jesuits. Or like there was one girl. It's also a little corrupt. It's all also one girl was caught drinking vodka in the lunchroom bathroom, like a decent amount of vodka, and that according to the Jesuit rules would mean she should be expelled. Instead, her parents paid enough money to have the whole dining hall renamed after them. So, you know, there's there's strictness, but there's also indulgences. Indulgences, that's a Renaissance term. Okay. He called me 5 days before our wedding to say the local priest told him he could not do weddings in his parish. He reported my cousin to the bishop. Why? He's freelancing while teaching, but okay. He said he could not afford to get in any trouble, so he asked me to get permission from the local priest where we lived. We were going to be married in my mother's rose garden. That's kind of out of nowhere, but I guess it's important. It seems like it could have been a little later, but I went to the local parish and explained what I want to do, and the priest said, absolutely not. I asked why, and he said, I will not permit a sacrament to be performed in an unsanctified place. Okay, so that's why the rose garden matters. You mean that this brick building is more holy than a rose garden? I said. Probably not the wisest thing to say. No. No, not to a priest. Again, but these stories so far are people who are like, the church should be how I want it, and the priest being like, that's not how the church is, and then going like, You don't know, but I feel like the priests and reverends probably know the rules and the importance. And for them, I mean, as far as you don't need to get a Catholic. If you're not going anymore, why do you need a Catholic priest? Why are you gonna just just get them, friend to get their license online or whatever? Okay. I agreed to do a quick ceremony at the church, then to have a party in the rose garden. Yeah, that's usually what happens. I'm glad we figured it out. But I wanted my cousin to perform the wedding. The priest said no. When asked why, I don't know your cousin, to which I replied, but I don't know you. So why do you need to do it at this church if this guy's going to be such a stick in the mud about it of like, I'm doing your wedding and it has to be here and I'm not going anywhere? I, that seems okay. I finally agreed to do it his way. As I was about to leave, he said, "Is your intended a Catholic?" I answered no, so he said that she would have to go to the 6-week course to prepare for the ceremony in the church. 6 weeks! It's not like a weekend crash course. I remember the movie with Robin Williams as a reverend, and him being like, "You have to be Catholic," and them going through the whole ceremony. I don't think it was a good movie. It was one of his later ones, but that's like the whole knowledge I have of this. 6 weeks to prepare for it. That's like 5 days a week for 6 weeks, or like one day a week for 6 weeks. Because if it's one day a week for a few hours, that's reasonable ish. Anyway, I replied, but she went to 12 years of Catholic school. What are you going to teach her in 6 weeks that she doesn't already know? Dude, it seems like you don't want a Catholic wedding. I so don't have a religious wedding then. If you're gonna have, it's like it's you're talking to the game master and you're being like, no, that's not how it. Why do we have to play by these rules? And it's like, he said that's not the point. There are rules. I mean, so I asked him what his suggestion was. He said to call off the wedding. That's where it gets too far. She's not Catholic enough, then you better just not get married. You know, I'm not digging the vibe of all these questions. You don't deserve a marriage. Okay. I was livid. I was so angry with the stupidity of the situation. That's actually kind of reasonable, but also I'm like, don't get a Catholic wedding then. If you can't handle the rules of what is going to be asked of you, or if you have no idea of what's coming your way, or that there might be some things like this, then you gotta suck it up or go to the government house. Or find someone. There's got to be someone who will. This just because this one is such a stick in the mud about it, and rules are rules. There's got to be another parish anywhere in your town or just outside of your town. Go to another zip code. I, okay. So I asked him what his suggestion was. He said to call off the wedding. I was livid. I was so angry with the stupidity of the situation. I went over to my father's house and told him what was going on. After a minute, he said, I have a solution. He called my cousin, and it was all set. What's the solution? We had a beautiful wedding in my mother's rose garden with my cousin doing the ceremony. The only difference was that my father stepped forward and asked the only required part. Do you take this person to be your spouse? My father was a judge, so he could legally do the honors. No one understood the significance of what my father did. He also signed the marriage license. No one can prove that my cousin married us. That was one of the last times I had anything to do with the Catholic Church. I Okay, so if that's a viable solution, why did why did you need a Catholic person anyway? If you had the judge and you ended up being okay with the judge doing it and signing the marriage license, I, it's all just pomp and circumstance then. You could have had a lovely ceremony with a nut. Ugh. I, I'm reading some comments on this one because I want to be vindicated in my belief that this was no, it's just more stories. Uh, uh and if anyone is wondering what, no, I mean, no, we got a lot of people who are just upset at the Catholic Church. Sure, that's fine. That's no, and I like I said, I've got my own stories about the Catholic Church, but uh, that's it. Just yeah, it's a very realistic game right there. Look how realistic that is. Yeah, Raid Shadow Legends is the most realistic game of all time. Okay, I think the answer is to all this. Don't argue with a priest if you want your way, because priests at least believe they have the moral authority of God on their side. So, especially with the rules, don't argue with priest rules. They they decided to never have sex, especially the Catholic one. They decided to never ever have sex. You think your little like, can we skirt around so that we can get married? I feel like every priest is bitter when they do a marriage. That's good. I should write that down. All right. Next one. Christmas Eve. We're back to Christmas Eve. I'm so glad it's Christmas was only 2 weeks ago. This is perfect. Christmas Eve, when I wasn't quite 20 years old, a group of men from another country walked into the church and sat down in the back pew. You could tell they were poor, but they were freshly washed and their clothes were clean yet tattered. You're kind of okay. That's you could tell they were poor. Sure. Why does it matter? If they spoke English, it was probably very little. Group of men from other countries, sure. All they wanted to do was be in church on Christmas Eve. Suddenly, here it is, the elder men in the church approached the group and escorted them out. I was so disgusted that I immediately got up, glared at them, and left. I never stepped foot in that church again. Very short story, but this is probably the first one that I actually go, yeah, this is a reason to leave that church. Completely, because anyone should be allowed in a service, and I don't think it. I mean, I think you should. I think first you should be allowed to wear anything you want for a service. I understand not wanting like crop tops or like bathing suits, or pajamas. That's that's maybe a little disrespectful, but even then, I don't know. I don't see a problem with it. Clothes are clothes. The thought that I I no one, there was no dress code for my church growing up. Um, I was always in like t-shirt and sweatpants as a little boy. I don't know. But to kick people out for not speaking English and for being poor, mix of both, and that's yeah, it's kind of disgusting. So yeah, and on Christmas Eve too. That's the one about Christ, and he was kind of all about accepting people, especially the poor. Okay. When I was 15, a man came to the outside front door of the church at the conclusion of Sunday services. He asked several of the people for money for food. He said he hadn't eaten for 3 days. The elders met for a couple of minutes, then told the man no and to get off of church property. Oof. Okay. To solicit after the services would make parishioners uncomfortable. But and also real quick, what's with the elders? Like, what denomination are we talking about where the elders have so much power all the time? It seems like there's multiple things about the elders having. Isn't there like a isn't it a volunteer thing of like it's just a church group? Anyway, this was a life lesson in hypocrisy, and it is something I have never forgotten, and I have one more. Before we go on to the one more, I don't know, especially when churches collect so much money, and they do, it's like I get that they also spend a lot of that money for the things that they provide, and they always have to make a new bell tower and all that, but if it was week after week that this man was coming by and it started to become a thing of like multiple people, that's different. There are shelters for that. But also it's a church, and you probably you just finished a service, so like, yeah, the person is playing on the kindness of the people for sure. But also, if anybody should be kind, it should be church elders. Like, even if he needs to not be there, bring him into the church that is now emptied, and take care of him. Be. I never understood why churches lock their doors. Because I get why you wouldn't want someone to sleep there, but if it's warm shelter and it's unused and it's all those benches are very comfy. Pews are a comfy thing to lay on. I mean, they're hard wood, but like, I don't think churches should ever lock their doors. I think you should be allowed into a church at any time. If there's like drugs going on and stuff like that, that's different. But as far as a shelter goes, and taking care of someone who's hasn't eaten for 3 days, which you have no choice but to take that at face value. You can't go, I don't think that's true. You get, if somebody says that, you got to go, oh Jesus. And would I take care of them? No, I'm a hypocrite. I wouldn't do anything myself, but the church people should. It might help. 16 years later, whoa, okay. So next lesson in hypocrisy. 16 years later, while running to be on the county school board, candidates were invited to an independent church for Sunday services. After the offering was taken, the pastor looked in the collection plate and said that the members were never going to heaven for a collection like that, so he passed the collection plate a second time. I have cat hair in my mouth. That's unfortunate. Although now we're talking about pastors, and I feel like pastors are a different level of it. All right, let me add that this was a small country church, and most members were barely getting by with the food that they could raise and sell. The minister was wearing a silk suit, and he owned a Mercedes-Benz. So, yeah, this is more the real problem as far as that goes, especially if it's the same kind of church. No, it's not the same, but it's okay. First, going back to indulgences, I thought those were supposed to be done back in the Middle Ages, when Martin Luther hammered his thing onto the church door of town, that German monk Martin Luther. Can you tell I went to a religious school? To make the Lutherans, but one, to use the money so flippantly um, especially if it's donation. And then if everyone's barely getting by anyway, like don't do that. I I don't need to say that people like Joel Osteen are terrible, but they really are. You know, like taking faith should give you hope, and it shouldn't be an unsettling thing. You know, I with being in a Catholic church growing up, it was so much guilt, especially once we switched to that other priest that was all about millstones around the neck. And don't get me started on television evangelists. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about with Joel Osteen. But it's like to to take that spirituality and the hope that people place in you and the trust and belief and they're there looking for guidance in some way because nobody understands what this world is, or what they're supposed to do. So to take that and what should be a harbor for your parishioners and a care for all of them, um, to take that and take advantage of it and turn it into you being the most important and you getting all the rewards, especially, material rewards of the earth, ethereal things that will go away that you cannot take with you. Um, it's hypocrisy, as it says in there, you know, hypocrisy and double standards, um, and to be unhappy with they were never going to heaven for a collection like that. That's gross because that directly ties money to goodness and your ability. I mean, I understand. There's a whole Bible quote of like, the a rich person that gives, like, this isn't a quote, this is a paraphrase, but the rich person that gives like a bunch of money to the church, but but not, it's only a portion of what they have, has such a it means so much less than the poor person who gives their only pennies to the church. Um, that makes sense, but it's not about going to heaven. It's about personal choice and sacrifice. It shouldn't be about, well, you have to do this in order to get to heaven. So we're gonna move on from that, but that's that whole diatribe. Have you ever Googled yourself? I haven't. Okay. Here we go. One day, I took my young daughter to a weekday mass. Weekday mass? Wow, someone's intense. She brought in some toys with her to pass the time. How old? Young daughter. Okay. Sure. I've seen plenty of kids with like a single toy car. Some toys might be too much, but we're not worried about that right now. It's better to give the kid a distraction if they're too young to be expected to pay much attention, but she was well behaved, whispered, and she wanted my attention, and otherwise played quietly with her toys. Then yeah, I mean that's a common thing, Or like I love sitting behind a little kid in church because they'll look at you and they'll be like, "Oh," like they can tell they're doing something that's a little slightly inappropriate, but in such a beautifully innocent way. That I love sitting behind a kid in church. Very fun, very funny, always very heartwarming. Anyway, okay. So she brought some toys to pass the time, and she was respectful about it. The old white-haired priest who handled the weekday masses. Okay, but you're going to a weekday mass. Weekday mass is for the serious. That's for the people that go to mass every day. That's weekend mass is the normal people, and then weekday mass is either people that work on weekends and are still religious, Or they're people that go every single day and like pray on their rosary and count the beads and all of it. Old white-haired priest who handled the weekday masses had proved himself in the past to be short-tempered and crotchety. Fun. Uh, he'd stop the mass and slam his hands down on the altar if someone forgot to silence a phone and it rang during the service. That's much, but that's pretty standard for any performing art, which I'm going to consider being a priest a performing art because you do go through. Performance is a bad term for it, I think, but you do go through, the whole thing. That's your show. That's your deal. Uh, you're the star of the show. You're the one everyone's paying attention to. So I could definitely see getting upset being interrupted by a phone. Even it's church. It's like, realize what you're doing. During the homily at this weekday mass, my daughter was playing with some figurines. Okay, but and lightly clacking them against the pew as she walked them around. I was watching her when I suddenly heard a slamming sound, followed by an altar server hustling over to our pew with a finger over his lips. I never had to do that as an altar boy. I never had to come over and silence people. I was the one asleep during the mass. Just that once, but, you know. Okay. With a finger over his lips. I looked over at the pulpit to see the old priest scowling directly at my daughter and me. He'd stopped in mid-sermon, slammed his hands down to make my daughter shut up. She wasn't talking loudly or running around the church or anything else. She was minding her own business and playing in the pew as she sat beside me. But the priest decided to embarrass my young child in front of the entire church anyway. His hand slamming made far more noise than she did. I told her to gather her toys. We got up and left and never went back. Yeah, I mean, no, that's an overreaction from someone taking it too seriously. But it's weekday mass. It's gonna be the old white-haired priest. Like if you, I don't know. Why'd you go to the weekday mass? If you were gonna, or oh no, I mean you can't ask to like get a babysitter for church. No, there's you did what you could, and he was kind of a dick. It's kind of black and white, this one. I can't play devil's advocate. It seems like he's kind of a jerk, kind of a real staunch, stingy jerk, and hasn't actually experienced a child in 70 years. So has no idea how children work, and that sometimes they can't listen to a priest droning on for an hour and a half. And toys are helpful for everyone else. Okay, I want to start with this one. Okay. How long is this? Well, we got a Baptist church now. Let's talk about Baptist church. Why not? Years ago, when my children were small. Nope, we're not doing this one because it includes the phrase "God hates N-words." So we're gonna skip that, but that's terrible. God hates no one, especially not for the color of their skin. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about that. God hates no one, not for their skin, not for their religious preference, not for their sexuality, not for anything. Or God hates us all. But there's no middle ground. He or she or they, or I've seen things that say God is water. So I'm like, nah, God is very impartial as to these very basic differences between us that are literally skin deep, you know? So that's a less fun one, and we're not going to talk about it anymore. I was a good kid. My parents wanted me to be confirmed Anglican. Okay. I went to most confirmation classes, but didn't go to the first retreat a weekend away. I was kind of forced to go to the second. I was confirmed in 8th grade. We didn't have any retreats for it as a Catholic. We did have some religious retreats in high school. Every year, there would be either like freshman year, I think it was like an afternoon. Sophomore year, junior year was like a full day, and then senior year it was a full weekend. I ended up as a senior, I ended up leading one of these retreats for the juniors, or maybe it was in junior year for the sophomores. I do not remember which. Doesn't matter. I turned that thing into a sham. It was. I followed the things I was supposed to do and say, but everything that I said and did was heavily weighed with sarcasm, and pretty obviously. Or I should be like, all right, now we're gonna talk about this. Who's got problems with life? What's your big problem? Like, it was good. It was good. I think I really got through to those kids that year. My partner, the other person leading the religious retreat, she did not expect to be sandbagged like that. But we also had some great moments. There was a kid that cried. You know, like, just because I wasn't taking the religious side of it as seriously doesn't mean that I wasn't taking the connection between the group. Anyway, kind of forced to go to the second. Nightmare. Um, we arrived at some place way out in the woods somewhere and had lots of physical activities. Physical activities, interesting. That is not what our retreats were. Our retreats were all like sitting in a room and talking religiously, and then gathering all together in a big room, and then like sharing stories on a microphone, and everybody crying and all that. So just physical activities, interesting. Again, as for confirmation, I just read some books and like had to write an essay on St. Thomas Aquinas. Or St. Francis? It was St. Francis. It wasn't St. Thomas Aquinas. That was my friend. My friend did St. Thomas. I don't even remember who I got confirmed as. No, I think it was St. Francis because I liked the animal deal. Okay. Nightmare. We arrived at some place way out in the woods somewhere and had lots of physical activities. All good. We were given some food. Not much, but we were all taught to appreciate what we were given. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, when I did a 10-day silent meditation retreat, not Catholic, all the food was unseasoned and there was no meat and it was just boiled cabbage. So it, yeah, having restrictions like that are nice. It was like a big cabin in the woods kind of place. Actually quite nice. Until it got haunted. But then, after a meager dinner, we were all gathered around in a big living room that had a lovely fireplace. One of the teachers was playing guitar and it all felt good. But we were getting really sleepy as we'd been kept pretty active for the whole day. Okay, this is kind of lovely at this point. This seems nice. Then the guy says something like, the confirmation ceremony is just a formality. You can accept Jesus Christ into your hearts right now. Yeah. I've been told such things. I think you can accept it anytime, right? Okay. Come on now, who wants to accept the Lord into their hearts right now? Come stand with me. I sat and watched as some exhausted kids got up. I saw a girl crying on the sofa next to mine, and some other girls across the room started spouting absolute gibberish, speaking in tongues, I guess. Okay, so they really exhausted these kids. That's maybe to a point of extreme. Yeah. But okay. I went through Yeah, through, I guess, with the confirmation thing. But this one experience has completely turned me against religion. You take a bunch of teens, young teens, feed them very little and deprive them of sleep, then try to force stuff onto them. Even at that age, I recognized attempted brainwashing. If this is an organized religion, why the F did they feel the need to control people in this way? Um, yeah, that's fair. That's fair. That's an intense retreat. Um, I'm glad the retreats that I went on weren't at that level. I had a friend who, um, oh god, there, he would he went to a Catholic summer camp or Christian summer camp, and he spent like the entire time quoting the Bible and all its terrible things about like how it's okay to lay with donkeys and stuff like that. So that's extreme. That's not how my experiences went ever. Um, and yeah, that does seem like cultish behavior, brainwashing, cultish behavior. I don't have much to say about this one. Other than if you watch this on YouTube, please click like and subscribe. That would be so cool. And also, tell me about the best church experience you've had. When did you feel the light of Jesus enter your heart last? You can accept him into your hearts right now, you know. All you have to do is stand up and accept it. Come on, join me.